We begin with a resounding victory for Johnny Depp over Amber Heard in the defamation case seen around the world. The Virginia jury finding that she defamed him, maliciously making up lies about him, abusing her, in a 2018 Washington Post op-ed, awarding him $10 million in compensatory damages and another $5 million in punitive damages. That $5 million later reduced to $350,000 because Virginia has a cap on punitive damage awards. On her counterclaims against him, the jury found in Depp's favor on 2 out of the 3 counts raised, but found that he, through his attorney, did make up a story about her intentionally trashing their penthouse so that things would look extra bad when police showed up one night. That one untrue statement should cost Mr. Depp $2 million, said the jury. But don't be distracted by her win on that one piece of her counterclaim. This was a total victory for Johnny Depp. Amber Heard has been humiliated, publicly deemed a malicious liar, and this jury says she's been at it for years. They essentially found her to be a fake victim, rejecting her claims of domestic abuse and sexual violence. The verdict tells us that they watched and listened to Ms. Heard on the stand and in the end did not find her credible. As I outlined in my talking points yesterday, this was a foreseeable and supported result. There is no question Ms. Heard did lie to this jury over and over and over, in my view. And in the end, whether it was this accumulation of obvious lies or just an overall belief that she made up this entire story, they rejected her testimonial, period. In the wake of the verdict, Ms. Heard blamed the, quote, disproportionate power, influence, and sway of her ex-husband. There's no question Johnny Depp did have more star power and sway within this courtroom, not to mention with the court of public opinion. But that was not an insurmountable obstacle. It was a factor in the trial, but it wasn't why she lost. Her own duplicity was. She lied over inconsequential things and hugely significant things as well, which I outlined in yesterday's show before we knew we had a verdict. And while she easily could have owned up to it with this jury by saying, for example, okay, I did leak to TMZ. I'm not proud of it, but I did it because I feared he would crush me in what I knew would be the coming PR war. She would have been in so much better of a position, but she couldn't admit to anything that might expose her as conniving, as a manipulator. That was a truth too scary to let them see, and her attempts to hide it only made it more obvious. She goes on in her post-verdict statement as follows, quote, I'm even more disappointed with what this verdict means for other women. It sets back the idea that violence against women is to be taken seriously. That's not true. I don't agree with that. Her allegations of violence were taken extremely seriously. She had 2 courts spend months at a time on them. She took the witness stand for 4 days in this trial, which lasted 6 weeks, to tell her story in a court of law. Her problem was not that she wasn't taken seriously. It's that her lies made her not believable. That is her failing, not one that will necessarily follow future accusers. But let's entertain for a minute the prospect that she's right, that other women will now have to plow a tougher road because of this case. Who's to blame for that? She is. She showed the world that abuse claims require careful, meticulous scrutiny because women sometimes do lie. She certainly did, in my opinion. Why didn't she just come clean about her op-ed being about Johnny Depp, for example, something she later accidentally confessed on cross-examination but first denied to the jury? Why didn't she just admit that Poopgate was an outrageous prank she and her friend played at a time she was feeling deeply wounded and angry at her husband, instead of blaming it on a 4-pound teacup Yorkie? Why didn't she just tell the jury, I did pledge my divorce money to charitable organizations, but then I started to worry about my career prospects and thought I might need to save it for myself instead. I shouldn't have said I'd already donated it. I'm embarrassed that I never paid. She lied about these things because they either reflect poorly on her or might have undermined her case. But the lies did more damage than owning these things could have ever done. And they were obvious. Unlike the battles over her abuse claims, where there was evidence that could go either way, these were gimmies. The truth was quite plain to anyone watching, and yet she couldn't and wouldn't own it. To the extent there is now more skepticism of the next woman's claim, Ms. Heard has only herself to blame. Heard's lawyer was on the Today Show this morning blaming cameras in the courtroom and the Coliseum-like atmosphere that resulted on social media, suggesting the jurors had to be influenced by all of that. Live by the sword, die by the sword, madam. Your client was the one who made this thing public in her request for a restraining order against him in 2016, in her multiple leaks to TMZ, making sure that they would photograph her allegedly bruised face that day, in her leaks of the tape showing Johnny Depp slamming cabinets, etc., which conveniently edited out the part at the end where she laughs at him. And of course, in her Washington Post op-ed, calling him an abuser and painting herself as a survivor. She's the one who started this PR war and has no grounds to complain simply because she lost it. Tarana Burke, the woman who first coined the phrase Me Too, and who now heads an organization by the same name, called this case a, quote, toxic catastrophe, and said the country, quote, still has to reckon with why it is so invested in the pain and anguish of violence. How unfair. Amber Heard had her day in court. She had able representation. She was listened to and rejected. That does not reflect some, quote, investment in the pain and anguish of violence by America. It means the jury didn't think she proved her case. To the extent Me Too was a means of calling out and calling to account abusers who use a power imbalance to sexually harass or abuse women in the workplace, it was a noble mission. And there's no question it's done a lot of good. No one misses Harvey Weinstein, Les Moonves, Larry Nassar, or many others. To the extent it turned into a witch hunt against men who were disliked for other reasons or who were guilty of mild workplace transgressions that could easily be dealt with and moved past, but instead suffered a professional death penalty, or to a place where accused men suffered a presumption of guilt, it needed a correction. All a woman deserves is the right to a fair hearing, not the right to be believed. Accused men, the same. Each party got that in the Depp v. Heard case. The system worked just as it's supposed to. Which leads me to my last point about the courts. While not infallible, the courts are our last best vestige against social justice warriors like the ACLU here, who actually wrote this op-ed for Amber Heard, who care more for blanket assertions of victimhood than they do for hardcore proof. Had Johnny Depp never involved the courts in this matter, he would still be presumed an abuser. Had Chicago never appointed a special prosecutor, Jussie Smollett could still paint himself as a truth teller. Had Kyle Rittenhouse never gone through the court system and been acquitted by a jury, he would still be operating under a cloud of accusation and suspicion. Our courts have done an admirable job of rejecting the search for social justice and instead prioritizing evidence and the law. It doesn't always happen. And law schools right now are full of wokesters who have a very different mission. But at the moment, the courts remain predominantly a place where the true administration of justice remains the mission. That is not a toxic catastrophe. It's a triumph. You tired of feeling like someone's always watching you on the internet? It's creepy. Maybe advertisers know a little bit too much about you, or you're concerned about the privacy of your identity? Using incognito mode will not solve the problem. IPVanish VPN is here to help you. They will protect your right to privacy and help you stay anonymous online. IPVanish helps you safely browse the internet without exposing your private details to third parties. You can use IPVanish on your computers, tablets, phones, even devices like your Fire Stick when you're streaming media. When you use IPVanish, all of your data is encrypted. IPVanish makes you virtually invisible online. It's that simple. IPVanish is now offering an incredible 70% off their yearly plan for our listeners with a 30-day money-back guarantee. That is like getting 9 months for free. IPVanish, super easy to use. All you have to do is tap one button and you are instantly protected. Take your privacy back today with a brand rated 4.6 out of 5 on Trustpilot. Go to ipvanish.com/Megyn and use that promo code MEGYN to claim your 70% savings. IPVANISH.com/Megyn. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.